something that I say along the way will touch you. I know it. Let's begin that process of crafting a meaningful life.
Here's Mary Crafts.
I have a topic today that's going to push your comfort zone. And it may or may not be something that you're comfortable with, but I would invite you to immerse yourself into this conversation. I've invited on today one of my dear friends, Charlene Paul, and you are going to love her. And what more you're going to love is love her new book that we're going to be talking about. Okay, so Charlene, welcome to Crafting Your Meaningful Life, because that's what you're about. You're about crafting your own meaningful life and helping others craft theirs.
Yes, and thank you for the welcome, Mary. I'm so glad to be here.
Well, you and I became friends when my book was launching, and you reached out and said, I want to be part of that launch. And so then we became friends. And then when your book came out, you sent me a copy, and I was like, okay, another book to read. Do you know how many people send me copies of book to read? I mean, I get 2 copies a week is about my average. And my thought is, I don't have time to read 2 copies a week. And then before people come on my podcast, the very least I want to do is kind of like scan the book and make sure that I understand. At least I read the first paragraph, the last paragraph, and kind of, the front cover and the inside, and then I know at least what they're talking about.
Right.
But that was not the case with your book. When your book came in the mail, I started with my same process of reading the inside and the back cover, the first couple pages, and then I was going to flip to the back. But when I read the first couple pages, I couldn't put the book down. And that is so not like me. I usually read when I'm in the car and John's driving, or when I'm on a trip and I'm in the airplane. I listen to a lot of audio, but to sit down and actually read this book, I read it in 3 days. I couldn't put it down. What a masterpiece, Charlene. And it's about something that we don't normally talk about. So I'm going to stop right there and let you tell people a little bit about you, and then how you came to write this book.
Okay, thank you, and thank you for that. I love hearing that people couldn't put it down, because it was probably, aside from being widowed at age 28 with a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old, and then remarrying and raising 6 kids, writing this book was probably one of the most difficult things that I have ever done. First of all, I've written for years, written for magazines and newspapers and just my own stuff, written for other people, never written a book. And then the topic was, I had to put it down several times because it's very heavy. It's very, in this 24th year of the 21st century in the United States of America, this stuff is going on in the name of God, under the guise of religion, through an organization given tax-exempt status by the United States government. And that is the Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or the FLDS. It's a polygamous group, cult. It's a polygamous cult. And I met Isaac, the main player of the book. I met him at a Family Roots conference. So I had written all a lot of the ad stuff for this Family Roots conference in St. George, Utah, a few years ago, about 5 years ago, and traded out for a booth. Didn't know what I would do with a booth, because I didn't have any Family Roots stuff to do. So I was wandering around. We would wander around and share our cards. And I came up on a booth that they were selling freeze-dried food. She had to, spin the wheel and get your treat. So I decided I would do that, gave her my card, and she said, "You're a writer." And I said, "I am." She said, "You have to hear my husband's story." And I said, okay. So she started to tell this story about this former FLDS polygamous man. And as she did, around the corner walks this 6'5" tall young man who was her husband. And she introduced us. And for about 20 minutes, he told me about his story. He was raised in a polygamous family, had 2 wives, 3 children, he was called on a mission to Texas in 2004 when then FLDS leader Warren Jeffs was moving people down there to redeem Zion. So Isaac was called down there. His wives didn't know where he was, didn't know how long he would be gone. 9 months later, Warren Jeffs kicked him out, stripped him of his priesthood, and he lost everything. And by everything, I mean everything. They don't own property. They don't own homes. A lot of them work for the church. So when you're kicked out, they take the property back. You lose your job and you lose your family. And
You know, as I started to read this book, this is one of the things that caught me. And I'm going to read this little piece. It's in the very beginning, in the introduction, and all the rest of this book are your words and how you've written it. But this first piece was from Isaac himself. And that just hooked me, hook, line, and sinker. And he said, it would be easy from the outside looking in to say, you are a grown man. How could you let this happen? I have asked myself the same question a million times. The answers are complicated. Being raised in that FLDS church and community, our learning was carefully guarded and guided. When Warren Jeffs took over the leadership of the church, he began banning all books other than his own writings and certain scriptures. He banned the internet, newspapers, and almost any other outside information. We were taught that the Gentile world was wicked and full of evil deceivers whose mission it was to destroy God's people. We feared displeasing God and his prophet, and we knew that the ultimate punishment for doing so was the loss of our families. That threat was always there. When I read those words from Isaac, I was just mesmerized. I thought, what you started out this podcast with, Charlene, how is it that in this United States, in the year 2023, when we are all about human rights and civil rights and about ending childhood sexual abuse and sex trafficking and all the evils of the world, and I devote my life to these projects, that there is a sanctioned community and church that receives tax-free status and yet is involved in every one of those practices. And as your book unfolds, I have to shout, I was just choked in my throat. Oh my, how is this happening? So he asked you to write his story?
well, no, as he's telling me this, I said, because I had taught at these conferences people how to write, to teach people how to write their stories rather than saying, I'm going to write my whole family history. Just write your stories, one story at a time. And so I asked him, have you written this, Isaac? And he said, I'm not a writer. I'm not a writer. And I said, oh, I don't care if you're a writer or not. You need to write it anyway. And he said, but I'm not a writer. And we went back and forth for probably 10 minutes. I'm not a writer. You need to write it. I'm not a writer. You need to write it. And finally, I just said, you know what, Isaac? I'll write the book for you. I will write it for you. Me, who has never written a book. He didn't know that. I'll write it for you. And he reached out and shook my hand and said, let's do this. And I said, okay. And I said, what made you choose me? And he said, I think you're the first honest person that I've talked to about this. I said, okay, well, let's see what happens. And so then for the next 4.5 years, he unwound this story that was,
Yeah.
I mean, I know about polygamous, and I know that there are many sects of polygamous sects throughout the United States, throughout the world. But what I learned about this one is that it has everything that you talked about: sex trafficking, human trafficking, child abuse, labor trafficking, and exploitation. It's all neatly wrapped in there, and they comply because they don't know any different.
Right.
This is generational. This is from back in the 1800s, and then they hold that that over their heads, that fear of losing your family. Step out of line,
Yeah.
and you're going to lose everything, and that means your families. And it was
Yeah.
heartbreaking for me, and angry. I found myself kind of angry at God several times. I had to put it down, and um, it kind of refined my spirituality as I
Mm.
as I wrote it. But
I can imagine this was life changing to write this book and to hear the details of this story. So I want to give my listeners a little recap about the FLDS Church. That they were originally, of course, everyone was together in the 1800s when Joseph Smith started the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, of what most people in the world know as the Mormons. And then at one point, polygamy became a part of that religion. And then at another point in time, they ended polygamy. And there were several sects that broke off who did not want to end polygamy and started their own religions. And this one is one of them. This one is, and I haven't lived in Utah my whole life, but I have lived here 50 years. And I can remember in one of the early parts of when I came to Utah, there was the whole part of this murder thing that went on, and that's right.
LeBarons.
And
Mm-hmm.
then it just kind of became
Yep.
like a funny part that you drive down the freeway and you'd see this group of houses that were like all hooked together, and the houses were like massive. And people would say, "Oh, that's the polygamous group over there." And you just kind of knew that they were there and you just ignored them. And there was an area of Salt Lake that was had this 10-foot wall around it, and you knew that was the polygamous compound, but you didn't really, you just kind of ignored them. And once in a while, you would see them at the grocery store or out, and they always looked the same in the long prairie dresses with the women with their hair tied up on their head, and the men very plain dressed. And um, they didn't seem like they were doing any harm. They were practicing, free religion the way they thought to be appropriate.
And that was one thing when I asked Isaac, after we started doing it. I said, what's your end game on this? What is your goal on this?" And he said, I need people to understand that the majority of them, he doesn't, he's not a part of it anymore, but the majority of the people are very good people, living the way that they were taught, living the way that they believe. And
Yeah.
it's that inner circle, the dirtbag inner circle that just knows how to exploit these very good, hardworking people. And and I think, if somebody wants to live with more than one person, or more than, see, even polygamy, the only wife that is the legal wife is the first one. They get a marriage license for that one, and after that, they call them celestial marriages. And and then when Isaac got kicked out, his wives were taken from him and given to other
When
men.
I read that part of the book, because you are so right, as you're reading the stories about Isaac in the beginning and the goodness of his heart and how his only desire was to serve God, and he continually worked upon himself. He would think, thoughts of like, how do I tackle that piece inside of me that I know has to do with jealousy? How do I tackle this piece? This constant road toward bettering himself and being the best version of himself. I began to just admire Isaac for his goodness. And then the love of his first wife. I mean, they had a love story.
They did, and the crazy thing is, they had seen each other, but they didn't know each other till the day they got married.
Yeah, that was the
And they
crazy
had
part of the book.
and they have a 7 hour lead time, that they're going to get married. But the support that they gave each other, the promise and the hope that was there for their family, what he wanted for his family. He lived at that compound, or was raised by that compound up in Sandy,
Yeah,
Utah, in Salt
yeah,
Lake. And he didn't live right where the 10-foot walls are, and that, but his father and grandfather had a 13-acre farm just a few miles
right.
from there. And he talks about growing up years, and his mother's, and the brothers and sisters. He's got 60 brothers and sisters. And just he said, we always had a friend. We always had somebody to
Right.
hang out with. I mean, they argued like brothers and sisters do, but he wanted so much for his family to enjoy the things that he enjoyed when he was growing up. And that's what he and his first wife Sharon were really working toward, and doing a pretty good job of it, until Warren just pulled the rug out from underneath them.
And as I read through this story, it seemed that most of the community were trying to live this very righteous life that was full of progression and hard work, principles that I taught my children.
Right.
And that the leader of the church at that time, what was his first name?
Rulin Jeffs was
Yeah.
when Isaac was a young man, Rulin Jeffs, and then his son Warren is the one that took over.
And the part where it talks about how that Isaac used to love to go see Rulin, and that they call Rulin their prophet, always had time for him and would sit down and offer the best advice. And I'm like, you could kind of get to see why this community, people wanted to stay there. There was safety there, and they were told about the evils of the outside world. I began to understand why people would want to be there. But when Rulin died and his son Warren took over, all hell broke loose in those communities, and they haven't been the same since.
No. And the sad part is, Mary, he's in prison now for life. Life plus 20 years or something in Texas. But it still has communication with the church.
Yeah.
And why I have what he's done, and the reason that he's in prison: underage marriages, rape, and the things that he's done. I don't know why he's in a medium security prison myself, and why he has contact. But interestingly enough, his son Helaman is taking over the reins of the church.
Oh.
And the reign of terror that Warren rained down on these people is going to seem like nothing with what it looks like Helaman is going to do to these people.
Really?
Oh.
I was hoping you were telling me he was going to come back around to being who his grandfather was, but...
Yeah, no. In fact, the reason he tells the people, Warren tells the people, the reason he's not out of prison is because they don't have enough faith to pray the prison walls down.
I've heard that.
Yeah. But now, Helaman Jeffs says that his father, the prophet, and whether that's true or not, is telling them that within 5 years, everybody is going to need to be translated, including the children. But the children are going to have to die first, and that is terrifying to me. That is terrifying to me. And there are a lot of ex-FLDS now speaking out, saying, my kids have disappeared. I'm out, and the law has given me full custody of my children, and they're gone. They've been kidnapped, or they've run away, or because the kids are terrified, of what's going to happen to them, and with the parent that has left. And so that's another reason that this story needs to get out. These people need help, and they need help from law enforcement. And Utah, a while back, I don't know how long ago, took polygamy from a felony to a misdemeanor, and then said they won't prosecute polygamy.
And it's one thing to have polygamy be a misdemeanor, just as, if somebody wants 2 wives, who cares? I mean, there are a lot of people that live together, right?
Yep.
But it's what is happening within that community that makes it so outrageous. So just, I was like gritting my teeth through the last parts of these chapters. And it's literally, people are trying to escape. And when they do, their children are taken from them. Their families are taken from them. They don't know where they are. They're moved to another state, their families, their children. And
They are, and they are masters of hiding. I mean, Warren Jeffs was in hiding for years before they just happened to pull his SUV over. They've got properties all over the western United States: Nevada, Arizona, Utah, Idaho, Montana, Colorado, up into Canada. I think they've got places down in Mexico, and they are hiding these children out. The deal is, they believe that the children don't belong to the parents. The children belong to the church. And any parent who loves their children enough will allow themselves to be disciplined, even to the point of being kicked out, and they will not take their children with them because they want their children to be exalted. Now, the ones that escape and then kind of figure out that all the Gentiles are not wicked and evil, and go through a legal divorce or however that works, where they get full custody of their children, those are the ones who are saying, look, I don't know where they are. I haven't seen them in months or years. And law enforcement is saying, well, they're probably runaways, so there's not much we can do about it, which makes no sense to me. Yeah. No sense to me. So get rid of the whole polygamy issue. Live however you want, whatever. But they're breaking the law. They are abusing children. They're trafficking children. They're trafficking women. They are, their labor exploitation is insane, and they're doing that under that guise of religion. They're breaking the law, and no matter what religious freedoms you have, you do not have the freedom to abuse, to traffic, to rape, to exploit. That's protected under the law, not under religious freedom, and that's the word that needs to get out. I'm terrified that this has the potential of turning into a Jonestown or a Heaven's Gate.
Absolutely.
In about 4.5 years.
Because those people who convinced them that God's will was for them to die and to poison themselves, and that's exactly what's happening here. Yeah. It's a scary situation as I think about it. As I read, Isaac's story, and let me just stop for a minute just to say the title of the book: Devotion, Deception, and Deliverance. And I think that really tells the whole story. These people are devoted people, devoted to God and what they see as God's leaders, and doing their best to live a good life. But the leaders have gone psycho. Oh, yeah. And that they believe that it's okay and that it's a good thing for children. I'm talking about 8, 9-year-olds to participate in sex and learn God's ways, and then to be young women, to be sex trafficked, to be sent to another community just to have sex with the leaders in that community. We're talking here major stuff. Yeah. How do we wake up the world?
I don't know. That's why I want this book to get out there. First of all, I want people to know Isaac. I want them to, he is a remarkable man. And the fact that he spoke out and was brave enough to allow me to write his book and to have it published and to go public, that takes bravery beyond probably anything that I've ever shown bravery for. These women who are speaking out now, and some men who are speaking out. We had a press conference a couple of weeks ago in Cedar City, Utah, where probably 20 women were there and spoke in front of the cameras to news people about their missing children, about what was going on, showing the legal papers, showing the pictures. I think that's the only way to get it out, because in the West, especially in Utah, like you said, the polygamous thing is, it's just part of life. We see them, and when we know that it's part of life. In the rest of the country, this is kind of, if they know anything about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Mormons, they know about polygamy, but they figured that was, some of them still believe that that's going on, and that, but as far as like with the FLDS and what's going on there are people on the other side of the Colorado River, not just the Mississippi River, but the other side of the Colorado River, who have no idea. And I think that my opinion is the more people outside who know about this, the more pressure can be put on the state of Utah to do something. They can't fix this themselves. They need help, and those kids and those young boys. And the deal is, young boys they're useful until they get old enough to become competition for
Yeah.
the older men, and then they get booted out. And with as young teenagers, booted out with nothing, left on the side of the road, sometimes by their mothers, because that's what they've been told has to happen. So the young boys aren't being trafficked, although a good portion of them more than likely have been assaulted in the name of priesthood and God. Um, and then the young girls given in marriage by their fathers sometimes, because that's what they believe they're supposed to do, to older men, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80-year-old men.
Who
To
want to have sex with a 12-year-old.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah. And the idea is get them pregnant quick, because it'll settle them down.
okay.
And I just think, in Utah, if you've lived here if you've got family for more than a couple of generations, you know about this. But people in the rest of the country, Canada, they need to know about this to put pressure on the people that can actually do something about this, and hopefully we won't have another Jonestown or Heaven's Gate, because we've got people like Isaac and some of these other women who are willingly, sometimes, and I know this sounds very melodramatic, but putting their lives on the line, their literal lives on the
Yeah.
line, to blow this thing wide open. And yeah.
So one of the things that just like dumbfounded me in the book is here's Isaac, this man we kind of pick him up at age, what, I don't know, 18, is he somewhere in that, when
Yeah,
he
21.
21 when the story starts, and just he just wanted to be so good. That was his only thought, is I want to be a good man and a good father and a good husband, and I want to be found clean and unspotted before God. And you kind of go through this whole thing, and then he does what the prophet says: you're going to marry, meet to 7 o'clock at the church building. We're going to marry you to this woman, my niece, and but he doesn't even question it. And then when they tell him he's going to Texas to help build their new compound down there, he just leaves. It seems like he does everything. He was promised to be paid for all these things, never was, and they're living in poverty, and yet he still keeps going. And then it was just like, in the middle of all of his goodness, they just said, you can't be here anymore. You're questioning. And just like that, gone. No
Yeah.
money, no family. His family, he didn't know where his family went, his 2 wives, all of his children. He was like, what? And I kept thinking that eventually, as the story went on, that I was going to find out that Sharon and his second wife did get out, and that they were the photos in the book. But I found out they never got out.
No.
And
No.
he remarried then, and that he has no idea where they are, even now.
No. Well, Sharon, his first wife, within the last year or so, has gotten out.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, she has. Daughter is still fully entrenched in it. I think the boys are out. But yeah, when he went to Texas, he didn't know where he was going. He just got called on a mission and was told, do not tell anybody where you're going, which was easy because they didn't tell him where he was going. He didn't know where
Yeah.
he was going until they pulled into that compound in Texas, and then was um, admonished, threatened, whatever word you want to say. Do not tell your family where you're at. You do not say a word to any of them, and and they just and they just do it because Warren Jeffs drilled into them that um, that he could never speak wrong because he was always speaking for God. Everything that he said was as if it was coming out of God's mouth. And so when Isaac started kind of having some questions and some wonders, he wasn't questioning Warren Jeffs. He wasn't questioning God. He was questioning himself.
Yeah.
Where are these thoughts coming from? And Warren Jeffs wouldn't even speak to him about it. And that's I think Isaac has a lot of leadership qualities. And I think that people who are like Warren Jeffs, they scope those kind of people out because they can become a threat to them. They could technically lead people away.
I kept wondering, why would you have this great guy leave? But that's exactly why.
Yeah. He was a threat, and any kind of a threat to Warren Jeffs, they're gone. They're gone. They're just out. And that is still happening.
So for me, even though I fell in love with Isaac, and I'm so glad he was out, and I was just thrilled with the new life he had started and all those things. At the end of the book, Charlene, I was left with such heaviness, such sadness. I wanted at the end of the book to be like, the sheriff's posse rides into the compounds and rescues all the women and children, and they lock up them, these perverted, older men leaders. And that didn't happen.
No.
It ends with just, it still goes on. And I was like, somebody, I got to get some air.
Absolutely. I had to get some air a lot of times because I knew that it wasn't going to, we weren't going to get the ending that we wanted. And he didn't get the ending that he wanted or that he deserved. Yeah. And it is heartbreaking. My heart hurts for him. He's a good friend. I talk to him a couple of times a week, and I have a picture of he and I when I gave him the copy of the book. That was the most glorious day of this whole. Besides meeting him, the most glorious day of the whole thing. He just, he rubbed his hands over the cover, and then leaned down and hugged me and just said, "We did it." And then we were at a little cafe in Nowhere, Nevada, and had the waitress take a picture of us, and I have that picture. It's in a frame, and it just makes me smile every time I look at it because he still is. He just tries so hard to be a good man, and he beats himself up when he makes mistakes, and he just, I've never met anybody like Isaac. I mean, I make mistakes and I feel bad about them.
Yeah. But
I realize that I'm very human, and that's just part of the process. But for him, it's almost like it just is, I failed again kind of thing. It just, that's where I would just like to, what the leaders instilled in them. I mean, it runs deep. It runs really, really, really deep. And the thing with Isaac, you've heard stories about the women who have escaped, and they want nothing to do with it. But Isaac got kicked out, and he wanted nothing but to get back in, and back in the good graces of everybody working so hard to get back in. That was an eye opener to me. It's like, well, you're out now. And now you've got freedom that you've never had before, and yet you still want back. Not today, but still, back then. And confusing.
Well, first of all, he wanted back in for his family.
Yes.
But next of all, it's hard to imagine that kind of brainwashing that goes on from the time that you are born. And when we wonder about how we hear all the time about childhood sexual abuse and how those children are groomed from the get-go, and this is our secret, or I'm teaching you things, or something's going to happen to your family if you tell anyone. And there is that sense, but they use God is going to punish you.
Yes.
And God is never going to have you in his graces, or God is going to reject you. And they brainwash them from just babies. And, like when people said about Elizabeth Smart when she was taken, that, well, why didn't you just leave? They don't understand the brainwashing, the manipulative techniques that go on here. And the thing I think that gets me the most, Charlene, and the question that I want to put to you and to our listeners, why does this matter? Why should people care?
That whole "Am I my brother's keeper" thing. Um, if it can happen, that whole, when this happened with they took away the books, but it didn't happen to me. They took it with World War II. This happened with the Jews, but it didn't happen to me. This happened to somebody else, but it didn't happen to me. And then it happened to me, and and there wasn't anybody there to help me or to save me. I have a voice, and I can't do everything. In fact, I can't do a lot. In all honesty, I don't have endless bunches of money, or endless um, relations with people who can do something. But I can write, and I can speak, and I can give voice to those who have no voice. And by doing that, maybe we can't save them all. We can't. But if we can help them learn to help themselves, then that will go further than me just trying to jump in and do, one thing. It's important because, there, but for the grace of God, go I. I was raised in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. My line didn't follow the line of polygamy, but it sure could have, because we're, some of the first that were in Utah. It could have been me. And if it was me, and if I was in that kind of a situation, um, maybe wouldn't hope that somebody would come and get me, because I wouldn't know any different. But as soon as I did, I would be grateful for the ones who did come to help, to do what they could do.
I think that's exactly right. You started off that answer with, am I my brother's keeper? This is not happening to, I'm hoping not any of my listeners, but maybe a few. But then do we turn away and say, that's not my problem. I'm working on my own problems. I don't have time for that. I don't have the bandwidth to lead that. And Charlene, you talked about you would like people outside of Utah to, have a voice, to write to our people, our governor, and all sorts of things, our representatives, or write to their representatives in Congress, to talk to the Utah representatives. There's
Right.
lots of things they can do.
Right.
But I also think in reality, it also falls to us who live in this state. It's no longer that they're just the odd people who keep to themselves.
No.
They're the odd people that are harming women, children, young boys, men, in ways that they will be scarred for decades. The healing path is long and hard for them.
A generation.
A generation.
Generations. And it Yeah, it just can't be. It can't be overlooked anymore because we know too much. A generation ago, we didn't know what we know now.
Yeah.
We know, and what we know, we are responsible for. And knowing what I know, I can't just sit back and go, well, that's not my thing, because I know something about it, and I am responsible for the things that I know.
Yeah.
I'm not responsible for what I don't know, but I am responsible for the things that I do know. And yeah, that's why I will do whatever I can to get the word out and to get the book out and to get the yes. What I would love to have every single person in this country have a copy of this in their hot little fists.
Yeah.
For a lot of reasons, but the biggest reason, honestly, the biggest reason is to get the word out, to just educate and meet Isaac. See what if you think you knew what courage looked like, you get to know
Yeah.
Isaac.
Oh. So I'm sitting here thinking, so, and like you said, once you know, you can't unknow what you know.
Right.
And so now that I know the situation there, and I would venture to say most of the people that are not in that sect know in Utah. So
Yes.
I ask, what can you do? I'm sitting here asking myself that, Mary, what can you do? And I'm thinking through it, and I have some ideas. Um, what if I buy 20 copies of this book? And you know that I come in contact with a lot of people. And if I know that I'm going to see somebody that day, that I write a note and I put it inside the book and
Oh,
why I want them to read this. What about the next time I see one of my congressmen? What about the next time I see the governor? What about the next time I see the mayor? I run across those people all the time.
and I need help from people like you because you have you have a you have a following, you have a voice, you have you know people. I'm just new in this. I'm just
Yeah,
coming into this whole thing. I need that kind of support. Isaac needs that kind of support. These people need that kind of support. And I think that would be glorious, Mary. I really, very, very unselfish of you and extremely helpful. And hopefully they will then pass on their copies or ask for more copies or something. Just, it has to get out because
yeah.
and yeah, it is time. There's a wonderful organization called Holding Out Help, run by it's a nonprofit started by Tanya Toole, who she helps these FLDS who have
I know
got
that organization. In fact, I donated to them.
it is
They
a
they are a great organization.
it is a wonderful, wonderful organization. If you're wondering about an organization to, to donate to or to donate time, or they're needing counselors and other, I can't remember other, they offer because when people come out of FLDS, it's not like you're reacclimating them. You're acclimating them. They don't have. Um, a lot of them don't have much of an education. They don't know much about the outside world other than what they were taught, that it's all completely wicked and evil. They don't. They escape with the clothes on their back for the most part, and they need help. They need help, psychological help. They need um, financial help. They need help with being trained to be able to work and to make a living. They are hardworking people. They are not lazy people. They are hardworking people, but they need that kind of
Yeah,
support. And so if someone is wondering where they can donate time or donate money or donate expertise, this Holding Out Help is the perfect
Yeah.
organization for this. I can't speak highly enough about them and what they do.
I'm just sitting here thinking, Charlene, I recently spoke at a UVU conference on domestic violence.
I saw that.
Why wasn't this problem represented there? I recently went to, of course, a meeting with the Maloof Foundation and their symposium, and Susan Matson talked about why aren't we moving heaven and earth to stop childhood sexual abuse? Well, it's why aren't we? Why aren't we looking inside and making differences here? I attended a Sapria event which deals with childhood sexual abuse, and their biggest motto is 1 in 4, no more. Well, what about in the FLDS communities? It's not 1 in 4, it's 1 in 1.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
How do we begin there? I have a voice in all of those situations. This is just like a light bulb coming on inside of me, Charlene. And I'm like, oh, this is how I can help.
Yeah, and I love this.
If every single person who was listening to this podcast thought, what could I do? This thought came to me while I was at the Maloof Foundation Symposium. And it was this. People ask me all the time, Charlene, almost every day, why are you spending 2/3 of your life devoted to all these causes and this philanthropic work and charity? Mary, you're retired. You should be like going to the Bahamas. I thought you wanted to go to Costa Rica. Why aren't you, having some vacation home somewhere and blah, blah. Why are you still doing this? And I've had to think hard and long about why I am. When people ask me I turned down an all expense paid trip to California, all expense paid trip to Oahu, because I had too many things on my calendar about helping others.
Yeah.
And so I have to ask myself that. Why? And to be honest with you, I think this is why, and it's the lesson, it's the insight I want to give others. And that is, I spend my life doing this because I truly believe I can make a difference. And other people don't believe they can make a difference. There's a handful who see what they can do, but there's a whole bunch who don't believe they can make a difference.
Yep.
And that's what I want to do. I want to give them the vision, shine a light on the path to how they can truly make a difference.
Absolutely.
And by listening to this podcast, if they are inspired to see the difference they can make, we can do this, Charlene.
I absolutely agree. I've asked myself the same question. I've had several ask me, a couple of my kids who are saying, Mom, April Fool's Day, I turned 65. And they're saying, you should just be able to just enjoy your time.
Right.
But you guys, I am enjoying my time. You guys are in the middle of raising your families, and that's where you should be. And I want that relationship with my kids and my grandkids, and I have it. But in the meantime, I'm still on my feet. I'm still breathing. Some would argue, I'm mentally healthy. I'm physically healthy. And as long as I am, I will do everything that I can to my last breath to make a difference. However I can. And that's what I want to do. I think that's one of the reasons I respect you so much, is because you just keep, you just keep pushing and just keep going. And you can rest on your laurels, but that gets old. And I don't, that's not what I want. I want to meet people. I want to help. As you can tell, one of my favorite things to do is to talk. And if I can put that to good use, then I'm going to talk and put it to good use.
All right, Charlene. Our time's up for today. I wish we had like 20 more hours. But people, there's links of how you can buy the book. It's called Devotion, deception. He was first devoted and then realized how he had been deceived, but then how he found his deliverance. This is a must read. It's a quick read. It's what I call a page turner. And I usually only read self-help books, but this is a nonfiction book, and this is Isaac's story, and I encourage you. Charlene Paul is the author. You can find this on Amazon. You can reach out to her on her website. All those links are included here at the end of the podcast. Charlene, my warrior friend, we're going to do this.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are. Thank you, Mary. Thank you so much for having me today. And we'll do this. We'll do this.
And this is how we craft our meaningful life. Namaste.
Crafting a Meaningful Life.